which obviously Israel hated. Just like Israel does not want a stable Syria, even if it's directly under the influence of another American ally, another regional player in the region, Turkey.
This is a similar playbook here for Israel's interest to look at Syria in that way. Also Egypt, which is Iraq. Until the Iraq War in 2003, Israel's biggest strategic antagonist, biggest regional antagonist, was Iraq, at least as they saw it. And that's why Netanyahu spoke before the American Congress to say, listen, I know something about fighting terror, and we must get Saddam. And they did all that. And it's like, all right, well, look at Iraq now. And it's not the same situation as Syria, but like mostly it is like a playground for competing influences of foreign governments. And in Iraq's case, like Iran has now been able to ironically, considering we were the ones who moved in there, like Iran is now able to project more influence there, just as, in say Syria, for example, you have your friends in Ankara who are trying to be able to project their power as well. But like the thing that is like the common thread there, right, is that both countries, both Syria and Iraq, are so much weaker as states. Yeah. I mean, they're non-military entities as states functionally, as far as Israel's concerned. They are no more regional threat.
The reality of the matter is, it like regardless of Saddam's weaknesses or tendencies for violence in its domestic population, like ethnic, his management of like sectarian tensions was to just fucking kill people and arrest them. If Iraq maintains stability and sovereignty, if Syria maintains stability and sovereignty, in a similar way, in a way that's not dissimilar to Iran, outside of like Western interests, and they basically develop themselves as sovereign nation states. I think that Israel would not be able to get away with doing everything that it's doing currently. And that's it. That is the major reason for why Israel wanted all of these other countries that presented a threat to its greater Israel project of death and destruction to be pacified or be destroyed in some way, shape, or form. They don't have to do it to the Gulf states, with the exception of Yemen, obviously, because those Gulf states are completely servile to, they've been domesticated, and they're completely servile to American interest, to Western interests. And that's it. That's the reason why they get away with just get away with being able to do their own genocides if they feel the need to do so. And that's the reason why they get away with being able to whitewash or engage in like sports washing and things like that. What were you going to say?
I think the only thing I would have to add to that really is just that it should mean something about the character of a state if the only way that it can continue to exist as such is if all of the neighboring states to it are like weak and destroyed and rotted entities that are unable to like serve their citizenry, that are unable to serve the people there in meaningful ways. And obviously that's not to say that like Saddam Hussein or Bashar al-Assad were like, perennial nominees for humanitarian of the year, but it is to say that like what has taken their place rather clearly seems like it's meant to serve the interests of people who are not in that country. And it's not something like that's that's a frame of discussion that's like pretty difficult to have in the United States, just because we still speak in the language of foreign policy moralism, even though more and more all the time it is like these aggressive strategic realpolitik or power politics stuff that clearly guide what people are after here.
Yep.
And that's part of what engenders the cynicism, is that it makes people say, if you constantly talk about human rights or why you're doing stuff, and then we have wall-to-wall starving children on the TV for weeks at a time.
Yeah, your word. I mean, I think like America's immediate move to represent itself as the global police in the aftermath of Russia's unjustifiable invasion of Ukraine, and then its unlimited support to Israel after October 7th happening under one president, I think played a big role in the way that even like our Western allies see the United States of America as like the world police. Because there are still a lot of people, I think, that just believe that eat up the propaganda. There are definitely people in the populations of these countries that live under the umbrella, under the protection of American empire, that certainly wanted to believe that, like, certainly wanted to believe that, like, America is, it fucks up from time to time, but it's like ultimately a force for good because the enemies are far scarier and far more evil.
And we provide, and also, but there's another piece of it, which is that, like, what do most people in a lot of these kinds of countries like care about? They care about where's their next meal coming from? Where are their kids' next meal is going to come from? How are they going to be able to build a house that doesn't fall on them? How are they going to have healthy and meaningful and long lives? And the Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore. Yeah. So what states exist that promulgate a theory of how you're going to be able to do that to better the lives of people around you? Remember, there's no Soviet Union anymore. And we're not in a position where it seems like China is trying to advocate like an international like policy ethos that would reconstruct that. That's just not how they think about these issues.
Even if it was to its own benefit, they don't do it in their own fucking backyard. As I constantly point to the Philippines, like they could be engaging in acts of direct destabilization in the Philippines, like,
they sell
arm the fucking Maoists,
and they sell arms to Israel. They sell arms to the Indonesian military, which uses them on poor islanders in West Papua New Guinea. I mean, there is a real I would say that it's when you have a world without the Soviet Union in it means that we just have like this liberal international order, which means that it's the only force that has been able to like credibly advance a case for, well, here is how like things improve for you person there is the boss of global capitalism. It's the United States. And so, like there's a lot of people who, because that's the only answer on offer to how do things get better, like they're hoping for it, even if they don't agree, obviously, with what like the U.S. is doing to support Israel. Or even if it means they don't have like a favorable idea or a favorable opinion of the United States or something, but it does mean that like the answer that the U.S. has for all of these things, which is like, we'll help you get your bread up, we'll help you build like, strong native industries that will allow you to, whatever, like the answers that they have for this, which which are themselves often just lies, of course.
It's going to be really good when foreign capital flows into your country. And by that, I mean, we're going to give your government money, and they're going to be bribed with like a piece of that money to bring that loan directly back into foreign corporations that will go into the pockets of not even the fucking laborers of said foreign corporations, but instead like the shareholders.
Absolutely. I mean, I think one of the examples that to me I've thought about a lot lately is, of course, just because of like the green the green transition. Is thinking about like the DRC and thinking about places like Kolwezi in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where again like the value chain is like it may as well not exist for the people actually picking coltan out of the earth with their hands. Like what promise is made to them?
Well, if we improve their material circumstances too good, then it's gonna be too costly to extract these minerals and extract these fucking natural resources that we need for cheap goods, cheap consumer items. So we can't do that.
And if you want to also like add a little bit to it, I'll like give a bit of historical context to it, like. Part of the reason that these places don't have the authority or the ability, the domestic integrity to be able to, develop their resources in their own way. Again, to develop in ways that aren't reliant on like making sure that the West will give you money. Those futures, those alternate paths that they could have taken were stolen from them. Because we killed their leaders, because we destabilized their neighborhoods, if not the countries themselves.
Yeah.
And continued to do so because it suited our prerogatives.
Vitor, okay, here, let's just give you the summarization of this conversation. With just 7% of Democrats now saying Israel's war on Gaza is fully justified. Ben Rhodes, who, again, like I said, self-hating a Jewish man, Ben Rhodes, according to Israel Defenders, says, why are we giving billions of military aid to a corrupt far-right autocrat engaged in war crimes? Tommy Vitor acknowledges Democrats are afraid to touch this, but if you can actually make an argument why we should rethink this relationship, and maybe it doesn't make sense to send $3.8 billion a year, which, by the way, interesting number. Who was the... Who came up with that? Whose number is that? That's weird. Who was the guy?
Who was the president?
Right, that was Obama. Obama's number, 3.8 over a decade on his way out, which we continued, of course, because once there's that money is allocated, that will continue and it'll only increase. Anyway, 3.8 billion a year to Israel to kill civilians in Gaza. I think you'll be pushing an open door. He questioned whether it makes sense to provide a really rich country with $3+ billion in military support per year.
That's a Matt Iglesias line, by the way. He's like, when he's talked about this in the last few months, he makes this point about like, when I interviewed Obama and I asked him about Israel, it was, why do we give so much money to a really rich country? To which I say, yeah, that is an interesting question on one level, but
that's when
it just also is like there's an answer for that, which is that like they do things that we want them to do.
Yeah. That's also when Matty Iglesias had freshly come from his West Bank trip and he was an anti-Zionist for a little bit. Wasn't there like a brief stint where Matt Iglesias was like, I think Israel's crazy racist.
I mean, it's a really hard thing. I think it's really hard for like warm-blooded, normal human beings to go to the West Bank and to come out of it with any other opinion, unless you're getting like a settler tour. Like, it's a sign. If you see that and your experience coming out of it is that what's going on there is anything other than like, a military occupation that's been going on for decades that rises to the level of genocide, frankly, at different moments in time.
Yeah.
Then like you're not like your human card may be revoked, pal. Like, I think you're just not seeing things as they are, and there's something about it that separates you from the rest of us. That's why
I don't yell too much about J Street, even though they're like liberal Zionists. Ultimately, they still inevitably create a bunch of anti-Zionists by doing those West Bank trips. I mean, yourself included.
I was about to say, and Simone, when we were here talking about that, it was part of that experience. The piece of it, though, I mean, granted, I will say, like, J Street has moved away from doing that with younger people. It's just no longer part of like it's a thing that they did 10 years ago. It's not as dramatically part of their work now. But I mean, that's always why, like, I think if you could, like, if you want to change somebody's mind about this, then like send them to Hebron. Let them see what's going on.
The host argued that the U.S.-Israel relationship is a political liability tied to forever wars, moral hypocrisy, and authoritarianism. You don't have to be a scholar of history of the Middle East to know that it's cynical when Democratic politicians mouth support for a two-state solution while giving a blank check of support to a government that wants to ethnically cleanse the Gaza Strip.
Shit was for naught. Yeah. Iran included, especially. To have done all this stuff to pass the JCPOA and have done none of the necessary political work to actually ensure that it could survive. Yeah. So yeah, I could imagine that his former staffers, or at least the people who positioned themselves and styled themselves as like the inheritors or the preservers of the best part of his legacy, are willing to say something. They're willing to say that like actually maybe like tethering America's future to Israel as the 51st state was a bad fucking idea.
Yeah, no, for sure. I like I said, that's why I was calling Ben Rhodes an anti-Semite, because of his influence or his role in implementing the JCPOA.